of a bouncer and a ballet dancer. It's got the capacity to bounce the bad guys, but it wants to do so by treading as lightly as possible. And therein comes the ballet dancer, or put succinctly, your elegant defense.
Rickdell's book, Elegant Defense, The Extraordinary New Science of the Immune System, tells the stories of 4 people whose lives were deeply affected by their immune systems, not always in good ways. Rickdell starts with the story of Jason Greenstein, his longtime buddy from high school.
He was all-state baseball and basketball, and great-looking guy, got all the girls. His life kind of went through some wayward turns, and when we were in our 40s, he came down with cancer. And it looked like he just wasn't going to be able to beat it. He had 15 pounds of lymphoma in his back, doubling every few weeks, and this was after years of radiation and chemotherapy.
Do you understand the difference between investing for growth and investing for income? That's okay. Most folks don't. Investing for growth is your typical Wall Street portfolio full of stocks and mutual funds. The problem is, in order to physically obtain any real money that you can use for your day-to-day expenses, you have to sell them, which means you don't own them anymore. So now you have either far less to generate that growth, or worse yet, you don't have anything left to create more growth for next month's expenses. On the other side of the coin, when you invest for income, your hard-earned retirement dollars are invested in products that may provide steady, predictable cash put directly into your bank account month after month to help provide for your retirement. For your free, no-obligation growth versus income information kit, call 848-2-INCOME. That's 848-246-2663. 848, the number 2, income. To learn how to transform from your high-risk, big-fee Wall Street growth portfolio into a steady, predictable, income-generating retirement plan, call 848-2-INCOME. That's 848-246-2663. 848, the number 2, income.
So, before the break, we had spent the first 3 segments talking about 12 must-dos to get your affairs in order. I don't know if you were counting at home, but I threw in a bonus. So, we actually had an extra one listed there. And just to summarize, having a survivor's guide in place, having powers of attorney for financial and healthcare matters, a living will, an advanced medical directive, a revocable living trust, pour-over will, getting asset protection addressed, getting your titling fixed, having your beneficiary planning reviews, doing tax planning in advance, not in arrears, having your allocations properly set up, and reviewing how you're going to fund catastrophic health issues such as custodial care needs. I know that's a mouthful, but each one of those is critical, and every one of you listening to this show right now has holes in your affairs somewhere, and they need to be addressed, and I hope that that's given you a good springboard to make a list and start fixing the problems. And there's something happening to many retirees today, and they're not even aware of it. They've hit what we call the tipping point. You're probably listening to that and saying, well, I've never heard of that before. I've never heard of the tipping point. You've probably heard of the 4% rule. You're probably familiar with inflation risk. You're probably familiar with longevity risk. You've heard of stocks and bonds and mutual funds. But you've never heard of the tipping point. So what is the tipping point? Well, very simply put, a lot of you are 70 and a half or older. And if you are, you're in the phase where you're being forced by the IRS to take required minimum distributions from your retirement plans. For those of you listening that are younger, you may not be aware, but guess what? Whether you need the money or not, the IRS allows you to defer tax for years and years in your IRAs and 401ks and other company retirement plans there comes a time when they say, you know what, you've been deferring tax and getting benefits long enough. You're old enough now where we're going to make you take some of this money out, and they're going to force you to take out a required minimum distribution in the year in which you turn 70 and a half. Now, many of you are already taking it. I have a lot of clients that the IRS is making them take the money out. They say, David, I don't need this money. I don't want this money. I don't want to take it out. Why do they make you take it out? Now, if you've done good income planning, this really doesn't have to be a huge issue. You know, when you turn 70 and a half, in the first year they make you take out about 3.65%, give or take. By the time you're in your mid-70s, it's closer to 4.5%. By the time you're in your 80s, you're having to take out over 5%. So again, what is the tipping point? Well, when your required distributions exceed income produced by the portfolio, you've hit the tipping point. Whether you know it or not, you're spending down your principal at that point. In a perfect world, you really want to structure your retirement planning where you don't have to sell something to get a distribution. You want there to be enough income in the portfolio so you can take the income out and not have to touch the principal. I had a gentleman come in that had retired some time ago, and he worked for a large company locally here in Memphis. They make a lot of paper that gives you a hint. But inside his 401k, his company, he was very conservative. He repositioned most of his money into a fund called a stable value fund. Now, interestingly enough, he thought it was guaranteed. Technically, a stable value fund is not insured. It's not guaranteed. In a worst-case scenario, it can actually lose money. But at the time, the stable value fund was paying about 1.8%, and he was in his mid-70s. He was having to take out about 4.5%. And basically, his account balance had been dropping every year for the last 5 years. He had hit